Okay.
Yeah, that's I make it done it's not. But there are a lot of stitches and things up there. I'm taking a photo. And this I really had. I actually go on. But these are really, this is just that we might get it. See how fair it is. You know, it's just fun. It's good. And if you're not going to do it,
Now, I watched
So I'm very to do this. No, not if
you're not fully vaccinated and fully vaccinated, I was certified, so I am. Well, I really make it safe.
But you know, sometimes I work with elevated, I work at this way. So I said, red and sand. Instead of $20.
You like that? Just keep me posted. Any changes?
Yeah. I was gonna go ahead and get this started.
Okay. Oh, I should put it on Saturday, so someone.
Let's try to get it.
Is this good play? I'm just playing a little intro here that Floyd didn't tell. This is Floyd playing the banjo. in the background here.
I know. I do get flowers. Anytime it's something up here. It's really impressive. Classy. It's
Evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. That, just so you know, that introduction there was, the music was actually done by our speaker tonight. So a man of many talents. Thank you all for being with us, for joining us. This is our August People Nature Art Talk. If you're familiar with People Nature Art, it's a monthly speaker series where we talk to all kinds of creative people. So we talk to authors and poets and painters and carvers, of course. So thank you for being with us. Let me give an especially warm welcome to our guest this evening, Floyd Scholz. Widely recognized as one of the top bird carvers in the world. And we are, I don't know if you want me to say this, Floyd, but we are in the presence of a living legend this evening.
Oh,
right?
just layer that.
Yeah, well, it's true. And you'll recognize that from the work, you saw his work as you came into the building this evening. But he was recognized in 2014 by the prestigious Ward Museum as a living legend. So that's pretty cool. Floyd has been a professional carver since 1983, and his work to portray hawks and eagles and owls and larger birds especially has won him a huge international following and many top awards at major carving shows. His work is in great demand. One of the reasons we're also very, very excited about having Floyd here, apart from his talent at carving, is that he's an educator and he likes to share his work and help others to do that. That's something the museum's very interested in too. And you probably are all aware that tomorrow Floyd will be here giving a painting demo. That will start at 10 o'clock. We do, if you're going to take part, we do need you to sign up online. Visit the website to do that. That'll be here, and if it's raining, we'll be inside and still be going on. So hope you'll join us for that. So, like Wendell Gilley, Floyd began carving as a hobby. He gave up his job at a certain point to become a full-time carver. And like Wendell, he also was very interested in the personality and the movement and the spirit, the beauty of birds and training that. you'll see tonight that one of the things that Floyd is famous for is a high degree of realism in his work. And you know, these pieces can actually be mistaken pretty easily for real birds. They're beautifully done. And he's mastered both the carving and the painting side of things, and known really for his technique of painting that he's developed himself. And he'll be talking about that tomorrow and showing that at greater length. I want to just welcome everyone at home also, and let all of you know this is, as I said, a People Nature Art Talk. We like these to be conversations. So after after Floyd talks about his work and gives us a presentation, I'll invite all of you to join in with your questions, and all of the folks at home too. Just put your question in the Q&A button. You'll see it on the bottom of your screen on one of the edges there. Type it in there and we'll make sure it gets to our speaker tonight. I have to give a little bit of a, we have been having some internet issues, the whole island has. So this is for the folks at home. If we lose you tonight, don't worry, we're recording this and we will send the video to you as soon as we possibly can. And just a little note for all of you here, for everyone who's listening, about the museum. We currently have a show up of photographs by a man named David Spicer. You'll see on the walls here. Those are going to be up through December. We have another show in our special gallery by original paintings by David Sibley from his latest book, What It's Like to Be a Bird. That show comes down Saturday. So it's up Saturday, it comes down Saturday night. So if you're interested in seeing that, it's David Sibley's personal collection work. This is your last opportunity. It's not really shown anywhere else. And we have a print making show coming up by an artist named Sherry York after that. Just a little context there. As you all probably know, this museum, the Gilley Museum, is really known for celebrating the art of carving. We share Wendell Gilley's carvings. We showcase the work of many of our members and people who take classes here. And we've been teaching carving here for 37 years with our own carver, full-time artist on staff named Steve Ballou, who you can often find right over here. And we are thrilled. We are so excited this evening to have Floyd with us, really to have a fellow carver and a teacher with us this evening. So I want to, it's really an opportunity to have a master carver with us. So I want to welcome you, Floyd, and thank you for being with us. Thank you all for coming. Okay, please. Go. Oh, yes.
Am I on?
You are on.
Well, I want to thank Melinda and Sean especially for allowing me to come. This was a pre-COVID thing we were planning. Of course, sometimes life's what happens when you're making other plans. And it's just an honor to be here. I send greetings from the Green Mountains of Vermont, the very dry Green Mountains of Vermont. And I will do my very best to try to encapsulate 54 years of my passion and love of birds and art. And nothing brings me greater joy than sharing it with the world, and especially in groups like this, and such a hollow ground in the world of bird carving. When I was a little boy, Wendell Gilley's book that came out, I believe, in the late 60s, was instrumental in giving me the inspiration and the ambition to want to take this to the next level. I began carving when I was 10 years old, and it evolved from carving fishing lures out of clothespins and little duck decoys and things. And when you're a little kid and you're doing this, and people want to start paying you for what you're doing as a hobby, that's quite an incentive. My friends were out shoveling walks and mowing lawns, and I was carving little bluebirds and mallard ducks in my basement. And I had a new bicycle and was able to get a mini bike, and I felt pretty special about that. And it's taken me to some amazing places and with some amazing people. So I'm going to do my very best in a short amount of time to walk you through a little bit about my passion. And I often tell people that if I had Bill Gates's checkbook, I would still carve birds every day. How do you define passion? How do you define this inner drive to want to just do something and to create? And I can tell you, to be able to share a love, not just of birds, but of woodworking, of nature. Birds are all around us and everyone loves birds. They're beautiful, they fly, they're different, 9,400 species of birds found worldwide, from little hummingbirds up to vultures. I mean, it gives us as artists quite a wide palette from which to draw inspiration. And frankly, they taste good too. So, you know, birds appeal to us on every level. And I think now more than ever, we need art in this world to make us feel good, because man, I clicked on the news for 10 minutes driving over here, and I went back to music because it's we need art, and we need to feel good about things. So I have some slides I'll share with you. I'm going to walk you through the process a little bit about how I approach this. I've never had an art lesson in my life, formal art training. So everything I'm going to share with you in terms of the visual display and talking will be things that I've evolved on my own. And let me tell you, I live in Hancock, Vermont, population 320, and there's not a whole lot else to do in Hancock, Vermont. So I sat for years in solitude and I developed techniques. I read a lot of books and I'm always inspired. And you'll see through the course of my presentation, certain things that really inspire me to just do what I do. And I've been carving 54 years. I've been making a living carving birds for the past 40 years or so. And it's not always been an easy road, but it's been a very satisfying one, again, to share one's passion. So we will open this also up to questions. I don't have any strict format, so you see a picture, you have a question come up. But again, this journey that I've been on of bird carving, and to be here in the Gilley Museum and talk about something that I can just wax poetically about for a long, long time is quite a thrill, I must say. So I will try to keep it as direct as possible for you. But first and foremost, I'm sincerely appreciative of you taking the time tonight to come to hear me talk. And we're going to have a lot of fun. One of the interesting things about carving per se is that as artists, our subject matter happens to be birds. But we are, as bird carvers, we are artists in the truest sense. We're sculptors, we're painters, we're storytellers. I like my sculptures, be it the red-tailed hawk or the copperhead or even a little bluebird in progress down there. I like to tell a non-narrative visual story about the bird, what it's doing, and somehow to touch the viewer in a very positive way. And then through teaching, I can share that passion as well. I've been teaching carving seminars. Several of you out in the audience are not only my students and alumni, but you're also my very close friends too. And that I value above and beyond everything. So as storytellers, as artists, I want to stress that we are not wooden taxidermists. Because I mean, it thrills me when somebody goes, my God, I want to touch it. It looks like taxidermy. You know, thank you for the compliment, folks, but it's sculpture in its truest sense. The wood that I carved is Louisiana tupelo. Comes from the bayous down in Louisiana, Mississippi. Why tupelo and not another type of wood? Several reasons. I'm known for carving large birds. I've done 22 life-size eagles so far in my career, and I have another one on the workbench right now. Tupelo comes from the bayous of Louisiana, from the tupelo or black gum tree. It's available in just huge sizes, so I can get big blocks because I don't really like gluing up blocks at all. And tupelo is a wonderful wood to carve for several reasons. It's dimensionally very stable. It has no pitch or resinous pitch like pine. And when I was first starting and I carved pine, I do have a little bald eagle that has freckles all over his head from that pitch pine that came up through. But the stability aspect is very important. And it lacks any discernible grain. Unlike certain types of woods, you're not fighting the grain with this. From the time Wendell Gilley was carving to now, the real evolution in this art form has come through the use of tools. A modern bird carver studio more often resembles a dental office than it does a traditional wood carvers with the chisels. I'm a romantic and I love tools as much as anyone. But when you can carve and shape a piece of wood using a rotary cutter and not be dictated by either grain direction or anything else, it's a real time saver. And I work on commission work for collectors. Time is certainly a paramount in my studio. So when I can utilize these tools, everything from an electric chainsaw for roughing out a big bird to little diamond cutters and things, that's to my advantage to do so. Carving, unlike bronze artists or clay sculptors, is a subtractive process. We are removing material to achieve our goal. You make a mistake and that eagle quickly becomes a red-tailed hawk. You make another mistake, it becomes a kestrel. Another mistake and you wind up with a hummingbird. So the old adage, a carpenter's rule of measure twice, cut once, certainly is most relevant when it comes to bird carving. Yes, there is some putty that you can put on, and I try to avoid that. But so you know, it's a very rewarding pursuit, not without its challenges and its frustrations, but that's all part of it. I mean, mountains wouldn't be mountains without valleys. So what I'll do is I'm going to share with you just some interesting slides that I'll talk about, and then walk you through a little bit of the process involved in carving some of these bigger birds that I've done. And it's always fun. I mentioned the journey that this bird carving thing has taken me on, and along that journey, I've had the good fortune of meeting a lot of interesting people and a lot of celebrities. So I've got a couple of celebrity pics too, so I can, for bragging rights more than anything, I can put those in there. But we'll have a lot of fun when we go through those pictures. So I will begin doing that, and then I will talk technique a little bit. I'm not going to bore you too much. Interestingly, a couple of years ago, an article was written about me in a major newspaper from Boston, and the writer began the article by saying, "Sitting in Floyd Scholz's studio watching him work will put you to sleep." Bird carving is a meticulous, tedious, mind-numbing, especially when you get into the texturing. I did a life-size golden eagle. Well, it's sitting out there. I estimate there's 60 miles of burn line that it took to do that. It is agonizing at times, and I love it. That is just, I've always loved the solitude of sitting in my studio and creating. And so I feel very blessed. You know, it's woodworking, it's love of nature, love of birds, painting, it's the whole package. So I'm a happy guy. So how do I get this show on the road here? Sean, you're the AV guy.
I'm gonna get rid of this little structure here too, if I can.
I'm very traditional, and when I need help with, as you can relate to this, I call my granddaughter if I need help with my iPhone or my computer.
So that should get you to the next one.
Here we go. We're going to talk. I'm going to show you a little bit about where I live and what really inspires me.
Let me just make sure this. Yeah, so you can use that.
Hey, look at that.
There you go.
I took this picture late September of my home. My wife and I live on a mountaintop in central Vermont, and our property is surrounded by national forests. And my studio is in the lower area down here. So each day when I'm working, I'm greeted with that. So that, I mean, you talk about inspiration. As an artist, if you're not inspired, the flame goes out. You know, writers, artists, culinary people, everybody, you know, you need inspiration. So when I can get up in the morning and I can be inspired by a view like that in the national forest, that's all we need. And in the evening, I'm a musician, and we'll get the fire going in the chairs, and I play banjo and guitar, and my friend with his fiddle and somebody else will come up and we'll sit around these chairs. Right now, it's my wife and my sister-in-law from last year, but we'll sit around, and as long as the beer is still flowing, we'll play music. And we just have a lot of fun up through there. But, you know, as an artist, you have to draw inspiration. And I was in Europe and I had a commission to do a magpie, and I didn't know much about magpies, but they were all over Europe. And I was in a park in Spain, and I was just sitting there drinking a coffee, and suddenly I was inspired. I was thinking, what could be the best perch for a magpie? Wow. So you keep an open mind, something might drop in, you never know. You know, This was in a park in downtown Madrid, and I kid you not, that picture was just like, of course, I modeled him on something a little different than that. But anyway, inspiration hits when you least expect it. And then you take that inspiration and you go back into your studio and you sit for hours and hours and hours. And we bird carvers cherish our solitude. So during the COVID pandemic, when we were told we had to stay home and isolate, big deal. You know, I didn't bother me one bit. I was as happy as a clam to just sit in there, and happy as a clam is a Maine term. I learned that from Bert and I. And so because I'm in Maine and there are a lot of shorebirds, I had to share with you a beautiful great blue heron that I did for a collector in Boston. And so I'll sit in the studio and painting, and there's a close-up of it right there. Very complex piece. And when I delivered it, I didn't know it, but he has a very nice place in downtown Boston. He had hired an architect, an interior architect, and actually built in the wall a niche, special place for this heron to roost. And there it is right there when it was all finished. But it's the delivery. People always say, geez, Floyd, what do you like best about this? Do you like, you know, the carving or the design or the painting? And getting paid is really not true. So when I delivered this piece, he sprained his wrist going for his checkbook to make sure that it didn't escape from there. That heron, I'm known for my raptors, but I'll tell you, very few birds of prey are as feared as a great blue heron. Let me tell you, I worked in a rehab facility in Vermont with birds, and the birds that we feared most were the great blue herons, because we had to wear welding goggles because, man, they would aim for your eyes. And there have been rehabbers who have had eyes taken out from a heron. Getting, they are lightning fast when they come through there. This is a piece I did for an investment banker in Toronto. And he gave me free rein on this. He wanted an eagle symbolizing money and power and wealth. And he's also involved in the stock market. So I had a massive block of Western redwood burl, a big piece of weight about 800 pounds. And I carved the bull and a bear. And when you turn it around, the bear is winning. And then when you look at it from the front, the bull is winning. So bull market, bear market. The beauty of bird carving, as I'm sure if Wendell Gilley were here, he would tell you that there's no rule book. Folks, we're writing the book right now. You can just inject your own feeling into the piece. So this was kind of a cool piece that I did for him. Took about 10 months to do this. The wingspan of the bird was 6.5 feet. And it was a big one. By the time there was so much burning in this and so much brown paint, by the time I finished it, I was calling it the BFBB. And you can put that middle F any way you want to interpret it. But it was George and Jim have had classes with me. You know, when you get into the burning phase of burning in all those feather lines, oh boy, it can be a real test. And another eagle that I did, here's a shot of me in my studio in Florida. I also have a studio down there, and I was working on a big giant golden eagle for an investor down there. And this gives you a sense of what it's like as it's evolving. One of the things I do, as an artist, it's an art to create these things, but it's equally, in my opinion, an art to correctly market and promote them and sell them. One thing that I really do, and I spend a lot of time, is I get the collector involved in the piece, so they feel that they have a real sense of and a hand in its development. So I would frequently send pictures of how it's evolving, or I would actually drive over and I would take the piece as it's being worked on and I would put it where it's ultimately going to go. Because you could be Rembrandt at carving and painting feathers and doing work that is the best in the world, but if no one knows about it, or if nobody's purchasing it, you'll go back to Home Depot and get that job selling hardware. So it's, you know, it's a balancing act at all times. And I delivered it, finished to the investor, and he was quite pleased. So much so that he ordered another one. So I sharpened my buck knife really fast. So we took it. One of my favorite friends and collectors is Glenn Close, the actress, and she was over in the studio and spent a weekend with my wife and I a couple of years ago. She had commissioned, she was married to a guy who lived here in Maine. She had a fascination with eagles, so I did a little eagle for her, and she came over and And bird carvers, man, who's done a pair of boobies for Bo Derek? Let me tell you, that was her boyfriend, and she went to Ecuador, and they went out to the islands, and they saw the blue-footed boobies in the Galapagos. And so he called me and he said, "This is going to sound strange, but I don't quite know how to phrase this, but I really want Bo to have a pair of boobies from me." So Bo sent me this photo after she got them. It was a lot of fun. So, and then Marty Short and Paul Schaefer, they're Canadian friends and both collectors of my stuff. And then I'm a banjo player, so who better to hang out with than Steve Martin? He was performing somewhere and we were backstage having some fun, and he was showing me a new A minor lick that he was going to be using there. And then bird carving, this journey has taken me into other avenues as well. And I've applied my bird carvings to really high-end electric guitars. And this is a piece that we presented to Carlos Santana in Los Angeles. He was performing and he loves owls. And you can see the moon. There's a crescent moon on that. And he was playing in Los Angeles, this big concert. So I walked out with this bird carved guitar in front of 31,000 people, and we presented it to Carlos. And it was nervous to go out there in front of all these people, and they're like, "Who the hell is this goofy guy here, with this guitar?" I didn't play it, I just gave it to him. Anyway, so I've done 22 life-size eagles in my career. This is a big bald eagle that I did on the base is an oval of redwood burl, and I use different stains in it. My formal training, if I had to say I had formal training, is in cabinetry. One of my uncles was a cabinet maker, and through high school, I worked in a cabinet shop, and I learned a lot about wood finishing and the different properties of certain woods that you can use. So I love to incorporate ideas and wood into my carvings also to enhance the whole story of the bird itself. And then these are a few selected little pieces that I've done in various seminars. Barred owl, a little screech owl on a carved book. I think this one said, love of birds, passion for art, and a pair of bluebirds and a little miniature eagle. You know, there's no limit to this. It's so much fun. Another collector who ultimately owns the eagle is Tom James of Raymond James Financial. This was down in Florida, and we brought that to him because so that was a good one. He owns a big museum down in St. Pete. If you're ever at the James Museum, it's worth seeing. We're going to get into now a little technique. A family of birds that I really, really love are the corvids. Corvids, well, magpie, you already saw how I was so inspired. Ravens, crows, jays. If there are smarter organisms on the planet, I don't know about them, because ravens and crows, they are brilliant creatures. This is a raven. The interesting thing about this piece, if you look at the base, which is all carved, I was inspired by this on a canoe trip in Vermont one time, and we were on Lake Pleiad, and we were just canoeing very quietly, and there were 3 ravens perched on this dead silvered snag of a tree that went into the water, and it looked like the skeletal remains of a large animal, and the ravens were just sitting there, and as soon as they saw me, they started croaking to each other, and then they flew off. But there is not a drop of black paint in this bird at all. This was done with a combination of burning technique, ultramarine blue, burnt umber, dioxazine, purple, vermilion, magenta, different wash coats and colors. But not a drop of black. I tend not to use black at all because I wanted to get that feedback. A great horned owl that I did, there's 3 colors in this entire bird. I'll be sharing a little of this with you tomorrow during my painting, but this is strictly burnt umber, ultramarine blue, and white. That simplistic blending of these colors gives you such a wide palette of possibilities with meticulous coloring. Here's a dinner, a speech that I gave up in Toronto. I don't know how this popped in there, but I was sitting at this table, and the 3 gentlemen sitting there, their collective net worth could probably buy any small country. And I was a featured speaker at this big animal nature fundraiser in Toronto. And they had me come up to that. The empty seat next to me was Harrison Ford was sitting there, but he had to go up, and when the photographer came around and took the photo, he was over talking to somebody else, but it's been kind of fun. And then this character here is not on food stamps. This was in London, one of the eagles I did for his office there. So getting back to the Raven, the burning techniques, the surface preparation that you use with a wood burning tool the wood has to be so sanded so smooth that you can see the wood burning techniques that I would use to emulate that feather texture. And a burning is an art form unto itself. It's something I particularly love to do is using a wood burner to get that soft, silky texture on the bird's feathers. So this is one of the wings of the Raven as I was working on it, and there it is fully burned. To do that one feather, probably elapsed time, 25 minutes maybe, of just sitting, and you get into a rhythm. If any of you have carved birds, and I'm assuming that several of you are into bird carving, you'll know that wood burning is just a rhythm. You get into it, it's an art form unto itself. And usually the best burning I do is later in the evening with a nice glass of soft cab and a little light music or books on tape, and just relax and settle in there and let the good times roll. So this is a photo of an actual raven's wing to show you the various colors involved and why I'm not prone to use any black paint at all, because I see everything but black in that wing. I'm seeing magentas and indigo and all these cool colors, and the kaleidoscope of birds' feathers, the patterns and the color and the texture are just present an ongoing challenge to we artists who are trying to emulate that. This is another nice shot showing the left wing segment from the upper Patagio region right down through into the secondary coverts and the tertials. And the thing about even a starling, when the light shifts, you get these absolutely immaculate color variations in the birds. And that's what really drives me in this. When I was younger and still in school, I had to make a decision about how am I going to pursue my love of birds? Would it be scholastically or artistically? Because I just love them. My mother would say when I was a little kid, I would just sit at the window and I would watch birds. But I realized that I was more attracted to what birds look like than the pressure of a peregrine egg at 13 days post laying. The scientific end of things are interesting, but what really turned me on was just why birds look the way they do. Certain birds are designed so perfectly for making a living. Peregrine falcons. If you've ever driven down the road at 60 miles an hour and put your hand out the window and feel that wind buffeting you, double that. Peregrines can dive at 180 to 200 miles an hour in pursuit of their prey. They're just so perfectly evolved to make a living. And driving here, in fact, I just get bored. I put my hand out at say 60 or 65 and think, my God, that's already something. And you do this, of course. It was a long drive, I'll tell you. So I came to Northern Route, by the way. There are two options, this Google Maps. I used to love Rand McNally, but with the Google Maps, you put in the address you're going to, and it gives you several options. A quicker way would have been to go down to Concord, New Hampshire, and across 89 and up the main turnpike the whole way. A little bit longer, but a lot more interesting, was coming to Northern Route through the White Mountains and Mount Washington. So it made the trip a little bit longer, but nonetheless, it was so much more beautiful to come along through there. Here's another picture of the Raven from another angle once it was finished. And the base, again, is carved out of basswood. It really just some scrap basswood I had in the shop. But the bottom of the base, if you notice, see the eye sockets, and you can see the very interpretive teeth down there. I wanted it to look almost like an old deer skull or a moose skull that was in the woods. And so therein lies the real expressive storytelling involved this art of bird carving. So, and then the base was painted with just a mix of raw embers, a little yellow oxide and such. The real challenge in this is ravens and crows have that throat patch, those shaggy feathers in the throat. And you can see to a limited degree some of the loose shaggy throat, and a lot of that's done with a surgeon's scalpel. I'll get in and just slice out little pieces of wood to get that. Again, there's not much else to do in Hancock, Vermont, so things like that. And the inside of his mouth. Bird carving can be a lot of fun too. When I was a little kid, I just loved the cartoon with the vultures, you know, where he's bringing home a bee, you know. And so for one of my granddaughters, we were watching those cartoons, and so for one Christmas, I did a little bobblehead for her, and then someone else saw it, and somebody commissioned me to do one. But the little head actually bobbles around, and you know, you got to have fun with this. It's if it's not fun, why do it? I mean, we're not here for a long time, Sean. We're here for a good time. That's my motto. And so, you know, you got to loosen up and have a little fun with some of these things, and don't ever limit yourself. I had the good fortune, I've always had a thing for women with Southern accents. So I married a woman from Venezuela. And I have a studio. I haven't been there in a while because it's a wee bit dangerous for us big gringos. But in the early 90s, I lived almost 2 years in South America in Venezuela, and I was just really taken by tropical birds. Again, the kaleidoscope of colors. And this piece was titled Flame. And it's a scarlet macaw coming down a branch, but to me, it just looked like a flame shooting up a tree. And again, the colors, the oranges and reds through there, just such a joy to try to recreate that with wood and paint. Scarlet ibis, another challenging bird. Anytime you have birds that have primary colors simply stated, blue, yellow, red, to try to get that to look soft and real is quite a challenge. And to do that, I rely on mixing various values of any given color. And again, I read a lot. I've never had art lessons. And I'm sure that if an art teacher sat with me, he'd say, you can't do that. No, that's not. You can't put those two colors together. I do, and it works. So this bird had all types of alizarin crimson and cadmium reds and different. I'll touch a lot upon that tomorrow. If you're going to come to my painting little workshop, I've got a lot of handouts, and we're going to splash around a bunch of color and have some fun. But toucans, I mean, these are a pair of sulfur-breasted toucans that I did, and to get that illusion of depth and transparency in the beaks was quite a challenge too, and that was done with multiple layers of color. And another scarlet macaw. Now this, I'm wondering why it's chopping off the head, but it is. But anyway, you can see the upper tail coverts and onto the tail rectrices. And these longer feathers here were done as inserts. So those are carved out of dogwood, which is a much harder, more stable, not more stable, but it's more resilient, I would say, some of those longer feathers. We as artists, we need deadlines. And a funny story about this macaw in particular, I did this to enter in the World Championships way back, I think in the 90s. And of course, I was running behind schedule. I was putting in late nights and early mornings. I was really tired. And 2 days before I was to leave for the World Championships, I had him, and I was working and painting some of the feathers, and the phone rang, and I was just so fatigued. I turned to grab the phone, and the tail of this bird went right into the side of the workbench, and it cracked it in about 3-4 different pieces. And you want to see a grown man cry? I'll tell you, I put it down, and I'm like, but anyway, we got it put together, glued back together, and all was well. But man, if I have a month to carve a chickadee, it'll take a month. If I have to have it done in 3 days, I'll have it done in 3 days. We need deadlines. I don't know why. My wife gets furious with me as a procrastinator, but there's just not enough hours in the day. So as I began to tell you my joy of, you may recognize a few characters in this flash photo here. This character here on the right, he's one I always have to watch out for. He's from Maine, and he used to go out and catch the lobster. And anyway, I got a BS degree in industrial education, and I love to teach. And one of the real joys is to run my Vermont Raptor Academy and just spread the gospel of bird carving to everybody out there. God, and I had a student one time. He was a Catholic priest. He came up from New Jersey, and we got in a heck of a debate one time, he and I, about, I was making coffee in the morning, and he said that you should always do that. And I said, why? I said, at home, you know, I always tell my wife to make it, and she stays in bed and she says, you make the coffee. And we got in quite an argument about it until he pulled out a Bible and he showed me Hebrews. He proved it. So anyway, so we that's how it goes. But that pretty much wraps up my little journey visually with you about carving. When I'm teaching, I use a lot of levity when I'm teaching as well, because carving, I could demonstrate something, go, yeah, you just take your tool and go zip, 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 just like this. When we do the flight feathers, right, Jim, we'll lay them out and I'll say, okay, next we're going to put in the secondary feathers, zip, 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 just like that. And everyone's standing there just going, argh. And it could be very frustrating at times too. So what I like to do is I use a little bit of levity to just say, look, relax. If your biggest problem in bird carving is that your feather isn't quite right, you're having a pretty good day. You know, if that's it, you know, it'll be fine, because somewhere out there, there's a bird that looks just like that. So, you know, you just gotta roll with it. I finish a piece and I am universally disappointed, because we always have the image of the real bird. And whenever I look at something I've done, I always think, oh, next time I'm going to do it a little bit better, or next time I'm going to change a little something. And I think that's very healthy. I don't ever want to finish one of my carvings and just sit back and go, man, I climbed the mountain. I just can't do any better than that. It's like winning the Olympic gold medal when you're 19 years old. I mean, where do you go from there? I trained to get a little bit off topic here. In the 70s, I was in 1979, I was a reigning NCAA decathlon champion. I won the NCAAs. In 75, I was invited to train with Bruce Jenner at a development camp in Chicago when he was getting ready to go to the 76 Olympics. He was 24 years old at the time. He was our hero. And he went on to win the Olympic gold medal at the age of 24, I think, or 25. And then, you know, he sort of got lost after that. He divorced the woman that supported him through all this training. And I remember thinking, man, you climb the peak of that mountain at such a young age. Where do you go from there? And luckily, with the art that I'm involved in, people always say, God, what's your favorite bird? What's the one you're going to, and I always say it's the next one that I do, because I'm always trying to try new techniques and evolve and come up with new ideas, because there really is no right or wrong.
I'm not interrupting. Let's make sure. This is what people at home are seeing.
Oh, am I stepping off?
No, I'm just going to stop this. And that way they'll get the full effect. There we go. That's better.
Sure, make my.
Oh, you look good. No, you look good.
I'm okay? Yeah. So this guy and his wife were sitting in bed one night, for those of you out there. And this lawyer guy was married to this, he divorced his other wife, he had married to his young wife in bed, and the phone rings at 2 a.m. So she rolls over and she picks up the phone, and he's sort of sound asleep, and she goes, how do I know? That's 300 miles from here. And she slams the phone down. He turns to her and he says, who was that? She goes, oh, that's some woman wanting to know if the coast was clear. So being here on the coast, I just had to think of that. Yeah. up here in down east, why do they call it down east Maine when it took me forever to drive way up here? I don't get it. But anyway, what we'll do now is now that you've seen where I live and kind of what inspires me and a little bit about some of the birds I've done. I would like to take an opportunity to just address some of your questions if you had any about the art form or where it's headed, or yes, sir.
Curious. These birds are enormous. Are you starting with a single block of wood? Or are you assembling pieces as the bird comes together?
It really depends on the bird and the pose. The big eagle with the wings out that you saw earlier in my presentation with the bull and the bear, the body of the eagle was carved from one huge block of tupelo. Each wing was carved from a separate big block. The advantage of tupelos, I can get it in big blocks. When, if all possible, I prefer to try to pull the bird from one block of wood. I try to avoid joints. A very dear friend of mine who sadly passed away a few years ago, Bob Gooby, was one of the world's great bird carvers. Bob had a great line. He used to say, time wounds all heals. No matter how well you try to glue something together, over time, wood, by its nature, will move and absorb moisture or lose moisture, and that seam will eventually show. To give you an idea, the red-tailed hawk titled Windigo that is here on display, the body, the head, the body, the right wing, and the tail all came from one block of wood. His left wing was carved separately and set under the scapular feathers, his left side scapular feathers. So there is no rule book about this, but I really try to get it, if possible, out of one block of wood. And in doing so, in the old days, I used to use chisels and knives and mallets and stuff back in the early days when I was just starting. And I had these Stanley made like a cheese grater type file called a Sureform file, and I used those. And then as my techniques evolved, more into using portable flexible shaft tools and electric chainsaws. My God, those are a real time saver. In 3 hours, I can take a big hunk of tupelo, and with an electric chainsaw, I can make it look pretty eagle-like and get rid of a lot of the wood. So
We have got 2 questions from the internet.
yeah,
And if you would be so kind as to repeat these questions so that the people at home can hear them.
yes.
The first one is, are there any birds you would rather not create, and if so, why?
Any birds I would rather not create? Well, it'd be pretty hard to do a peacock in full spread, but listen, if a collector wanted one, I would sure give it an old college try. There are no birds that I don't like. I mean, I'd be willing to try anything. I love a challenge, and I've never carved a penguin before, or I did a kiwi for a friend of mine from New Zealand. That I did do, but no, I carved turkeys. I'm doing 3 pheasant in flight right now, taking off for a collector up in Cambridge, Ontario. No, really, my love of birds and the challenge of carving birds is such that as I don't know, George Bush once said, bring it on, I'll do it. So.
All right, so the second one is, do you ever have dry periods of not being inspired enough to carve? And if so, how do you get out of those slumps?
Everyone goes through dry periods. You talk to any novelist, any writer, any chef, anybody who's involved in the creative pursuit will go through periods of what they call writer's block or drought. I've been doing this for a living for 40 years now, and I rely on bird carving to pay the bills, which seem to just get higher every month. My God, just driving over here with gas, filling the car with gas, I remortgaged my house to come over here. So how do I get through those? I accept the fact that they are part of the process. I don't let them get me down, and I shift my focus to something else. Normally, I'll have 4 or 5 birds going in various stages in my studio. As I mentioned, I'm doing 3 pheasant in flight right now. I'm doing a big owl in flight. I've got a puffin 90% finish that I hope to bring, but it just didn't happen because the grandkids are there. I've got a little bluebird I'm working on right now. balance is a good antidote to dry spells. If you get working on one piece and you just hit a wall, put it aside and maybe pick up something else. Another thing that saves me is music. I play guitar and I play banjo, and I love to play both. So if I do hit a dry spot, or I'll pick up the banjo and pick it a little bit. When Carter boycotted the Olympics in 1980, I was in a dry spell emotionally. I was engaged to a model and I thought my life was on the fast track to becoming some big shot, and then suddenly everything just caved in. I got my ring handed back to me with the famous line of, "I think you love me more than I love you," So that was, turned out to be the best thing ever, but I learned to play the banjo because it cheered me up, When I picked up my guitar, all I was playing was the blues, all those E minor chords. So I picked up the banjo and, you can't be sad when you're playing a banjo. That's for sure. And there are terms in the English lexicon that you rarely hear. One is, "Hey, is that the banjo player's Ferrari?" You never hear things like that. A banjo player pulls into a shopping mall once, his banjo's in the backseat. He runs in to get something. He comes out and his car's been vandalized. The window's broken. He looks in, there's two banjos in the backseat. So, you gotta have a little fun with that stuff. What other questions? Yes.
Do you take photographs of live birds that you use?
Yes, I do. Yes, my reference, my reference library, I love books and I always have. When I was a little kid, to me, books were a door to an escape somewhere. I love adventure and travel books and stuff, and bird books especially. In my library in Vermont, I have over 1,000 volumes of books. Lansdowne's books were always a great influence. His Birds of the Eastern Forest, Volume 1, Volume 2. I mean, I still drool when I look at those. The Audubon, even though Audubon was what they call a shotgun ornithologist, he would shoot the bird, stick it, pose it in a pose he wanted, and then he would eat it usually if he could. Those were the days when you can get away with that. And I used to do a lot more photography than I do now, simply because we have access to this miraculous tool called the internet and Google. I mean, hello, you want to see anything, you Google it, Google Images, and you want to see 37 views of a red-tailed hawk's beak? Well, there it is. It's almost too easy now to reference things, but I still like to take pictures. I mean, my camera is, filled with stuff, and we have hummingbird feeders around the house and chickadees and stuff, and I'd love to take lots of photos, of course, and have files and files full of them.
I should mention that you have 7 or 8 books.
I've authored 8.
8 books.
Yeah.
So just talking about reference material, you provided quite a bit of that.
Yeah, in 92, I noticed, they always say, find a need and fill that need and you'll do well. My focus in the 70s and into the 1980s was really birds of prey. At the time, you wanted to get a book on birds of prey, and mainly it was a field guide. And if you wanted a picture of a red-tailed hawk, it'd be like some out of focus picture, one up on a tree or on a fence post. And I thought, here's an opportunity as an artist, and I love to write. I was approached by Stackpole Books, and I wrote Birds of Prey. It was published in '93, and it's since sold almost 500,000 copies. It's really done well. And Wendell Gilley's books were a big inspiration. Bruce Burke, Game Bird Carving, came out in '73. And I was the kid that squeaked by with C's in English class in grade school. I never dreamed that I could write books, but that here we are all these years later. I've authored 8 of them. Owls, which is up here, Birds of Prey, Golden Eagle, Red-tailed Hawk, Kestrel, Peregrine Falcon book. Yeah, a whole bunch of them. They take a lot of time, but very rewarding to do. Plus, from a marketing standpoint, I'd be less than candid if I didn't say when a collector approaches you and says, well, it's show me some pictures of your work, or I'm interested in something, send them an autographed book. It's like sending a hook, and you got them. The old adage, oh yeah, she wrote the book on that. Well, here we are. So Anyway, yes, sir.
Have you ever done long-billed curlew?
I have not yet. But we'll talk after this is over. No, I haven't. I love shorebirds, especially whippoorwill and ibis. They're so lyrical and they're so poetic. When I did the great blue heron, the picture that I showed you, I was given free rein to design a piece. And so I really I was inspired by like a ballet dancer, how they would just be so graceful. And I did that great blue heron preening his shoulder feathers. Someday, maybe, who knows? The book is still being written. As I tell people, I'm nowhere near the end of where I plan to be with this thing called bird carving. So it's been pretty darn good, right, Jim? Yeah. So, yes, sir.
Good question for you, for folks who won't be here to see your demo tomorrow. Could you just talk a little bit about your technique for painting? I know you do. I think you use airbrushing quite a bit. And I heard you say something about using washes,
Oh, yes.
but you use acrylic. So how does that work?
Well, getting back to the fact I've never had school art lessons. So I use acrylic paints. I use Liquitex paints primarily, and also Golden and Pearl. I'm not really brand loyal, but my technique is such: after the wood burning is done, I usually, depending on what the bird's final color would be, I'll seal the wood with 2 coats of a penetrating wood sealer. And then I will use a white gesso to provide a good white painting base. And then I start blocking in the base tone colors of the bird itself with very thin, watery washes. Now, the benefit to this is that I'm taking advantage of that texturing of the wood surface, and then I can apply thin washes. And what happens is the thin, watery washes, the paint pigment settles into the texturing, and it amplifies the texturing even more. And with successive layers, think about the Caribbean Sea when you fly, say, into Aruba or over the islands, or even here for that matter. You see that deep, beautiful depth of that turquoise blue color. What you're seeing is reflected light coming up through from the sand, and the white gesso provides that base, and then the reflected light comes up through. And the beauty of developing this art that I've developed in my studio in solitude is that I have made so many mistakes, I can't even begin to tell you how many have come out really crappy. But for every 10 or 12 times I destroy it, maybe one time it'll work, and I'll put that in my back pocket. And the next time I apply that. So the time continuum of developing this art, even to this day, I'm teaching techniques now that I didn't do 2 and 3 years ago. So sorry, George, you haven't been with me for a couple of years in my seminars, but I'm seeing some friends here that used to take a lot of classes with me, but my painting techniques have evolved. The airbrush is something altogether different. The thing about an airbrush is some artists go, airbrush. If you ask them, have you done any airbrushing? They're almost indignant as if it's cheating. Airbrush. No, that was all done with brushes and wet on wet techniques and stuff. And they think that the airbrush is this newfangled tool. Folks, airbrushing, applying pigment to a surface via an airstream, predates bristle paint application by 10,000 years. The Cro-Magnon, the Neanderthals were in the caves in southern France, creating these murals of a cave bear and ibex and all of these incredible murals in hands. How? Not with a brush. The Chinese applied hot bristle to bamboo 10,000 years after these guys were putting hollow reeds, dipping it in fly ash from a fire or blood from an animal or crushed berries, and they would dip it in and they would atomize it onto the surface of these caves. That's airbrushing, only without a compressor. Their lungs are their compressor. So the application of paint pigment to a surface, it's as old as time. So that's always my comeback to these guys. Airbrush. I use an airbrush, and I'm proud of the fact that it is just another tool in your toolbox of carving techniques. What I love about Wendell Gilley's book, which I have a first edition copy at home that I treasure, is aside from the fact that I used to just marvel at the carvings that this man was doing. I never met Wendell, and I truly wish I had. Was that he wrote that book at a time when bird carving was just shifting into a new phase. Up until the mid-60s, there was no such thing as wood burning at all. It was Gilbert Maggioni and Reverend Jack Drake from Carlsbad, New Mexico, who came, I think, to one of the Salisbury shows back in 1968 with a pair of doves, and he used a wood burning tool to emulate that feather texture. And that's the first time a wood burner had ever been used in the art of bird carving. What a transition in the late 60s. And then you had artists, well, I don't know how much of it Arnold Melby did, really. I don't think he did much burning, but modern wood carvers now, the tools have evolved to the point where my burning tools, I sharpen them like sharp knife blades, and I can burn 80 to 90 lines per linear inch to get a very fine effect. Like a puffin, for instance, any of the alcids that live in the ocean in very harsh environments have extremely dense, fine plumage. And you modify your burning techniques to suit that. Another thing that I love about bird carving is you have to really understand nature. You would never carve an Atlantic puffin and mount them on a saguaro cactus. Why? Wrong environment. You wouldn't carve a road runner and having them running and galloping across a kelp bed, chasing a green crab. You know, the beauty of bird carving or any type of nature art is you also learn a lot about the environment and how precious it is. So when I started, I said, now more than ever, we need art. And, you know, driving over and listening about it's very dry in Vermont and things are drying up in Lake Mead, for heaven's sake. So every retired mafia hitman is sitting on his couch, you know, stressing out because they're finding all of these, you know, I can picture these guys in their running suits with their gold chains. Jesus, what are we gonna do? I need more Xanax, you know. But you know, we're living in an absolutely incredible time right now on every single level. So one of the things that I'm hopeful for, and I'm trying to get my grandkids kind of more involved. I give them paper and let them come in my studio, and I encourage them to be creative and to try to do things that are not related to this electronic stuff. Because we were in a restaurant about 2 months ago, and my wife and I were sitting there, his family of 4 came in, all 4 of them, you know, husband, wife, 2 kids, and they all sat down. Nobody spoke. The waitress came over and, oh, and then yeah, I'll have the, and then they all went back to this, and I'm thinking, wow, here we go, you know. And so I try to get my grandkids out into nature and drawing. My little granddaughter, when she was probably 2, I brought her in my studio, sat her on my lap, and I put a big piece of paper out. What did she do? She put her finger on it. She thought it was a touch pad because that's what she learned to draw. She put her finger on the paper and started trying to do that. And I said, no, honey, this is called a crayon. So we, just like when Arnold Melby and Elmer Crowell and these guys in the 60s, I think right now we're seeing in society this incredible transformation, which is why I'm really trying to promote the art of bird carving, because we live in an age now, everything's instant. You know, you can, anything, Google this, you know, find out, you know, how many solar systems are in our Milky Way galaxy. Well, Google and you'll find out instantly. It's almost too easy now. Anything you need to know, it's right instant at your fingertip. And everything's mass produced. You know, you want something, you go buy an expensive car, there's 10,000 other cars just like it. This type of art, that's it. There's one of those. And I never replicate anything. I don't mass produce anything. So every carving I do is signed and numbered and registered in my book in my studio. Right now, I'm close to 800 since I went professional to carving. I was given very good advice when I was quite young to start numbering and registering my work, who got it, how much it sold for, date, any particular things. And I have a book like a registry book in my studio, and I could go all the way back to 1982. And even before that, actually, back in the school days. My second bird I ever carved was a little mallard drake, and I gave it to a girl I had a crush on in like the 6th grade or something. And, so it's been quite a ride. But as I said earlier, I drove 7.5 hours to come here to share this with you. And folks, it was worth every mile to come over here to do this. So, you know, I just can't express my gratitude any more than to say a sincere, heartfelt thank you for sharing a few minutes with me and letting me yak on about what I love so much. And yeah. We live in a beautiful part of the world. I'll tell you something. It's so pretty here, and I look forward to coming back.
We look forward to having you.
Questions from the folks at home?
Huh?
Will you ask if there's any more questions from the folks at home?
Where do I look to look at the camera?
You're looking right at it.
Right at the hour.
All right, you folks at home, you got any more questions? I'm here for you. So bring it on. Let's hear it. So if there's anything else, I'm happy to answer. Yes, sir.
2 questions. One, are you familiar with the work of Nick Dunlop as a record photographer?
I know the name, and I think I have a couple of books that he's done that are quite marvelous.
Yeah, and I think he is one of the best in the world.
Mhm.
And that influences the second question is, there's been such a revolution in photography technologically in the last 8 to 10 years. Has that influenced your input on birds that you've done in the last 10 years?
I don't think it has really. The technology now with the power of the scopes and the clarity of some of these things, it's, you know, if I were a modest bird out there, I'd be a little nervous because they capture everything nowadays. I mean, yeah, I mean, go walk through this spectacular museum and just look at not just the photography, but the interpretation. Think of the hours these photographers didn't just finish their coffee, walk out in their backyard, and go, okay, click, there it is. A lot of these pictures represent hundreds of hours of sitting patiently, getting eaten by mosquitoes, freezing your cojones off to get just the right photo. And then they have to edit through hundreds of photos to get the picture. Look at the cuckoo flight right there.
Yeah, that's a fantastic.
It's, you know, incredible stuff.
Yeah.
These birds didn't just fly in front, go, here I am, you know. The patience involved is staggering, and each picture tells a story. It truly does. Wow. I'm really looking forward to, you know, I was fatigued when I first got here and I brought in some work to set up, and I was, you know, anticipating talking with you tonight, but I'm looking forward tomorrow to having some time to really digest the museum and go around and study. And I have no ego about this at all. I don't. I'm always learning. I'm already seeing poses and things that Wendell Gilley did that I'm thinking, God, that gives me an idea. So sitting in a park in Madrid, the farthest thing from my mind was, you know, I was thinking about magpies because I had to carve one, and suddenly, oh, look, there's one. And I took a picture. So anyway, again, Sean, I don't even know. Okay, well, we timed it just about perfect. So there you go.
I just want to actually encourage everyone who's here, if you haven't had a chance to look at the pieces that Floyd brought for us to take a look, because we talked about, you know, the way you carve it, about it being so realistic and beautifully done. But I mean, if you're not looking at the split, you can see almost where the wind is moving some of the feathers. It's incredible. So take a look at these before you leave, if you didn't get a chance to do that.
The story about this piece, while it's here, I'll share with you. It was back in the late 90s. I was on a ski lift with a buddy of mine in Middlebury College, Snowball, never forget it. And the Allen chair goes right up along sort of a cliff face as it goes up to the very top. And about midway up, it was very windy, so the chair was sort of swaying. There was a dead tree that had fallen where the branches were overhanging the cliff. And as we were coming up by, a red tail flew under our chair, looped up, landed in that bouncing tree limb that the wind was buffeting. And the red-tailed hawk was trying to get his footing and just perch. But every time he would try to perch, the wind would catch him and he would move. And he looked pissed. His head turned, he flared up his hackles, and his tail hit, the wind would buffet that gorgeous russet red tail. And it reminded me of the flamenco dancers when they dance and they're throwing up their dresses as the castanuelas are clacking away. And there was the inspiration. I went home after that and I started sketching triangles and I came up with the concept. So this piece titled Windigo gives you a visual interpretation of wind, everything from the lacquered black base, which is reflective of light, to the talon-like roots of the branch clutching that wind, carrying you right up through. Every nuance of that is carved. None of it's real. And then here's the bird. And if you look at the bird, his eyes will follow you. But I made his eyes slightly oversized, maybe a half a millimeter larger, to convey that essence of just bordering on frustration and panic. Like, God damn it, I just want to perch. And then the tail, I purposely ruffled up his tail feathers to give the impression of buffeted wind. And I brought this piece specifically to share that concept with you, because if ever I've done a piece that tells a story, this is it right here. And he's spinning around in a very agitated way, just wanting to perch and relax a little. And in doing this art gives you the ability to tell stories like that. The little copperhead snake with the leaves, for heaven's sake. The cryptic coloring in the copperhead and the soft maple in the early fall, and a little chipmunk, you know. That chipmunk will probably get away. He's not in any danger of becoming prey, but it's called hide and seek, because the copperheads could just get into those leaves and you wouldn't even know he's there. And, chipmunks too, they get into the leaves. And years ago I used to deer hunt, and we used to hunt way up in the Allagash, my father and my uncles and I. And I remember I was probably 16 years old or something. I was sitting there in the woods and it was real quiet. And all of a sudden I heard, and I thought, God, the world's biggest buck is headed my way. And my heart's pounding and I'm getting buck fever and I'm starting to sweat and I'm getting all nervous. And it's getting closer and closer. And I'm going, oh my God, it's going to be like main trophy buck. And I looked, and what was it? 2 red squirrels in the leaves jumping around. And it sounded like deer coming through the woods. A couple of red squirrels, you know. So, and I heard them before I saw them. So anyway, come up, take a look. You know, I'm going to hang out here and have myself a sip of water. But thanks, folks, so much. Really appreciate it. And everyone in the line, I salute you, and I thank you so much for watching and joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, it goes by fast. So that, yeah, holy smoke. Another thing about the eyes of the red tail, they dilate. If you move, I polish the lenses. I made the eyes for this one. And I polish the lenses so that they kind of dilate. And you make your own eyes. Yeah, you're there. Out of a let's stand up. Yeah, I'm going to stay down the room today. Stick them high. I love the thing. Yeah, yeah. They're very sick. Oh, yeah, there's a meeting. There. I still use one, so I still use all great. The little bluebird. Then we're going to do a smaller tube.
Thank you very much. I do have another question for you. I'm one of those 500 people who bought the Birds of Prey book because there was nothing like it when you came out with it.
Yeah,
That's why I wrote it. Yeah.
You know, if you wanted to know if the undertail coverts of the carbon felt, we're out of luck.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask if you've also ever done any immature, particularly juvenile bald eagles. I find photographers almost always go for the adult. And they think that's the difference between all our eagle, and I think immature eagles are the most incredibly big.
They're the green ones, and they're often mistaken for golden.
Yeah.
Mottled brown color.
But do you ever get a request?
No, the eagles I've done, they always. On the trail. All they go in full, you know, adult white head. No, you don't see many carbons doing miniature birds because most people don't understand it, you know. Bald eagles don't get the white head until after 5 years, but the third year bald eagle is actually bigger and more powerful than in the past. Longer wings, bigger flowers. Okay, I'm with you.
It's intriguing that it carries over into that area.
But I, you know, in the world of carving, I'm a hired gun. I do this to make a living. And so I do work with collectors. If a collector wanted an immature plumage bird, I would welcome that in a heartbeat. So you're welcome. And I'm full of trolls.
Association.
Oh, you are? Yeah, I knew there was some connection. I used to lunch.
Yeah, I know. You know, maybe I just noticed that we did a huge conference tonight.
I've done several presentations over there.
Yeah.
Imagine back in the 30s, shotgunners sitting at their blowing. You know, I grew up in 42 years ago. Not knowing what I was going to do. I never. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate what I'm at to. Keep in touch. Send me an email. Not yet. I do have faith that when I finish but the work I do is commission. Currently, I have a 2-year veteran commission. When it's finished, my wife is all too happy to say. But tough one. I mean, I love that. It's living in the house, you know, but I just borrow that for the exhibit and I have a borrow. You know, it's hard when you do live in the old stuff, when it's I can do it never. I do want to do it. Just we can expose to the market. Classic legislation. When I finish it, I finish a piece. If somebody wants to buy it, so it's all. I was like, oh, yeah, well, that's what the lady was telling me. I said, where'd all these birds come from? When will Gilley's wife would keep them, and she donated like 100 birds. No, you go to my house, you wouldn't even know what I did for a living, really. I don't have card birds. Yeah. I'm the founder of that. Dailies. I
was wondering, did you pick up anything from working with birds?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
They, they're working on the broken bones and stuff like that.
Oh, every bird that I handed down, learned something. You know, the layout of the axle up there. A lot of birds, when you put them on their back, they're ankle use. that traffic jam with feathers in Martha area was always a must do. And then in Virginia, I used to work at a bandit station out in Short Hills, out in Sterry Hills, Virginia. And we would band and cut their tails and food, sharpings, and then we put all the plant flies up, because one of them were over with this parasitic and little, we call the people. Oh, they always learn, even to this day, always.
It seems like that's up close and personal. Just watching the movies.
Yeah. To get that home, so I had to really sort of laugh. We had live cocktails at the Rapid Center. And then I moved my arm to get him sort of shift out so I could see how the nape covered and shift. So, first I rock.
So is that right?
Where'd you go?
I